On my daughter Eleanor's wedding day, her arrogant groom, Ethan, introduced me to his boss as an unemployed nobody. Ethan fell silent when his boss, Marcus Thorne, smiled, embraced me, and said, "Arthur, my friend, it's good to see you." Then he turned to the groom with a chilling stare and said, "You're fired." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. But that final, devastating judgment was the culmination of a 4-month lesson. A lesson that began on a cold February evening in a Manhattan restaurant that smelled of old money and new ambition. I had arrived first, a habit from a lifetime of believing that punctuality was a quiet form of respect. The hostess led me to a secluded corner booth at the Gilded Lantern, a place where whispers were more valuable than shouts. The soft lighting reflected off dark wood panels, and the air was thick with the scent of leather and expensive perfume. It was a world I knew intimately, though one I had not actively participated in for some time. A few minutes later, I saw Eleanor. Her face lit up as she navigated the tables, a beacon of warmth in the coolly elegant room. Behind her were two men. One was her fiancé, Ethan Croft, radiating a restless energy that seemed too large for the space. The other, a slightly older and gentler-looking man, was his uncle, Julian. "Dad, this is Ethan," Eleanor said, her voice filled with a hopeful pride. And his uncle, Mr. Julian Croft. Ethan's handshake was exactly as I had pictured it. Firm, brief, and intended as a statement of dominance. His eyes, a sharp and intelligent blue, did a swift, almost imperceptible scan of my attire, a simple but well-made cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. It was a look I recognized, the quick appraisal of a man who measures the world in price tags. He dismissed me in less than 3 seconds. "A pleasure, sir," he said, the word "sir" feeling more like a formality than a sign of respect. Julian offered a warmer, more genuine greeting. Once we were seated, Ethan immediately took control of the conversation. He spoke of a recent 7-figure property deal in Soho, peppering his monologue with industry jargon designed not to communicate but to impress. He moved with the jittery confidence of a young predator, convinced of his place at the top of the food chain. He barely paused to let Eleanor or his uncle speak. "You have to be a shark in this city," Ethan declared, gesturing broadly with a menu he had barely glanced at. He ordered a vintage Bordeaux without consulting anyone, then turned his attention to me, a faint, patronizing smile on his lips. "So, Arthur, Eleanor tells me you're enjoying the retired life. It must be nice to have all that time on your hands. I honestly wouldn't know what to do with myself." I simply smiled. "You find ways to stay occupied." My quiet response seemed to fuel his confidence. He saw it not as restraint, but as weakness. Leaning back in the plush leather, he surveyed the room as if he owned it. "It's a tough world out there," Ethan said, picking up his fork. "Especially in New York real estate. You have to be aggressive, forward-thinking. Take my company, for example. Vance and Thorne Properties. A legendary name, of course. But you wouldn't believe the kind of old-world thinking I have to fight against every single day." That comment hung in the air, a casual indictment of the very foundation that provided his generous salary. I leaned forward, feigning simple curiosity. "Old-world thinking?" I asked. "Help an old man understand. What does that look like at Vance and Thorne?" Ethan took the bait instantly, clearly thrilled to have an audience for his revolutionary ideas. "It's a culture problem," he began, lowering his voice conspiratorially as if sharing a great secret. "The company was founded 30 years ago. The founders, Vance and Thorne, were brilliant for their time, I'm sure. But they were basically just lucky, right place, right time. The New York market was a different beast back then." Eleanor shifted uncomfortably. "Ethan, I'm not sure Dad is interested in company politics." No, it's fascinating," I said, my eyes fixed on Ethan. "Please, continue." Encouraged, he went on. "The point is, the world has evolved. But some people at the company haven't. They're stuck in the past, clinging to outdated methods. They represent legacy, not innovation." He then did something extraordinary. He glanced pointedly at his own uncle, Julian, and added, "No offense, uncle, but you know the type. people who value loyalty over results. Julian, a kind man who had spent his life making careful, steady investments, seemed to shrink in his seat. A dull flush crept up his neck. He had been quietly proud of his nephew's success, but now he was being used as a prop in Ethan's lecture on corporate ruthlessness. "So you feel experience doesn't count for much these days?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. "Experience without adaptation is just stagnation." Ethan shot back, the line clearly rehearsed. "Frankly, the company is carrying too much dead weight. We'd be twice as profitable if we replaced half the senior staff with hungry young talent who aren't afraid to break the rules." Dead weight. The phrase was delivered with such casual cruelty. He was talking about men and women who had dedicated their entire careers to building the company that now paid for his expensive suit and the fine wine he was drinking. He was talking about people who worked for me, for Marcus, for 30 years. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of similar pronouncements. Ethan was a philosopher king, and his kingdom was a brutal meritocracy where the old were discarded to make way for the new. Eleanor tried to steer the conversation to wedding plans, but Ethan always brought it back to his own brilliance. When the check arrived, I reached for my wallet, but Ethan waved me off with a flick of his wrist. "I've got it, Arthur. Consider it a welcome to the family." The gesture was meant to be generous, but it felt like another assertion of power. He was the provider. I was the dependent. We said our goodbyes on the cold sidewalk outside. Eleanor gave me a tight, worried hug. Julian shook my hand with an apologetic look in his eyes. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. "Great finally meeting you, Arthur. We should do this again after the wedding. I'll give you some pointers on how to manage your retirement portfolio." I watched them get into a taxi, the bright lights of Manhattan reflecting off the car's polished exterior. I stood there for a long time, the chill of the February air seeping into my coat. He saw the world as a simple contest between the strong and the weak, the winners and the losers. He believed the founders of his company were merely lucky, and its loyal employees were dead weight. He wanted to tear down the old world to build his new one. Very well, I thought, as I turned to walk home. I would give him the chance to try. My home in Evanston is a modest, comfortable house from the outside, intentionally so. It projects an image of quiet retirement. But the moment I stepped into my study and closed the heavy oak door, I was back in my own world. This room was the true story of my life. The walls were not covered in family photos, but in framed architectural awards and photographs of a much younger Marcus Thorne and me, standing on muddy construction sites that would one day become gleaming skyscrapers. On the wall behind my desk hung a framed copy of the first major contract Vance and Thorne ever signed. The ink faded, but the ambition still palpable. This room was my fortress, my command center. I sank into the worn leather of my armchair, the anger from dinner settling not into a hot rage, but a cold, clear purpose. Ethan's arrogance was not just youthful foolishness. It was a philosophy, a worldview that saw history as an obstacle and loyalty as a weakness. It was a danger to my daughter, and it was a danger to the company I had built. But an accusation without irrefutable proof would just seem like the ramblings of a bitter old man. I needed confirmation. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus's private line. He answered on the second ring. "Arthur, to what do I owe the pleasure?" His familiar booming voice filled the line. We spoke for a few minutes about business, a new zoning permit for a downtown tower, a minor issue with a contractor. I was retired, but I was never truly disconnected. Then, as if it were an afterthought, I steered the conversation. "By the way, Marcus, I had dinner with one of your senior managers tonight, a young man named Ethan Croft. He's dating my Eleanor." There was a brief pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was more measured. "Ah, Ethan, yes. A real shark, that one. His numbers are fantastic, can't deny that. But he has some of the sharpest elbows I've ever seen. Thinks he's the smartest man in every room he enters." "He seems ambitious," I offered, keeping my tone neutral. "Ambitious doesn't begin to cover it," Marcus chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "He's been making noise about modernizing our approach, which is his code for getting rid of anyone who's been with us for more than 10 years. He has no patience for the past, that one." It was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't share the details of my dinner, the insults, the condescension. Marcus didn't need to know, not yet. After we hung up, I swiveled in my chair and looked at the large calendar on my wall. I found the month of June and circled the 15th, the date of the wedding. Ethan had given me a stage, a public forum filled with his colleagues, his friends, and most importantly, his boss. He believed he was the director of his own show, but he had just handed me the script. I would not expose him. I would simply give him the grandest stage possible and allow him to perform. 4 months. It was more than enough time for a man like Ethan to build his own pedestal, and then to bring it crashing down upon himself. The lesson had been decided. Now, it was simply a matter of stagecraft. Several weeks passed in deliberate silence. I tended my garden, read the paper on my porch, and perfected the role of a man with nothing but time on his hands. I heard from Eleanor often, her calls filled with wedding updates and a carefully unasked question hanging in her voice. She knew something was amiss, but she didn't know what. Then, on a bright Tuesday afternoon in March, Ethan's sleek BMW pulled into my driveway. He emerged first, adjusting his tie as if preparing for a board meeting. Eleanor followed, clutching a stack of elegant, cream-colored envelopes. "Dad," she said, her hug a little tighter than usual, "we brought the invitations." Ethan stepped inside, his eyes doing another quick, dismissive inventory of my living room. "This is a very charming house, Arthur," he said, the pause before charming doing all the heavy lifting. "It's good to be grounded, away from the chaos of the city. Very cozy." I smiled. "It suits my needs." Eleanor handed me an invitation. The cardstock was thick, the calligraphy exquisite. The ceremony and reception were to be held at the Azure Club, a venue so exclusive it was practically a fortress for the city's elite. Ethan had chosen it, of course. "It's where Vance and Thorne holds all its major events," Ethan announced proudly. "Marcus Thorne will be there naturally, along with several board members. It's important to project the right image for an occasion like this." This was his opening, and he took it. He sat on the edge of my sofa, leaning forward with an expression of manufactured concern. "Actually, Arthur, that's something I wanted to talk to you about. Man to man." Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. "Ethan, don't." He waved her off gently. "It's fine, honey. I'm just trying to help. Arthur, I know you've been out of the corporate world for a while, and things have changed. The way you present yourself at an event like this, it matters. It reflects on all of us." I simply nodded, giving him the space to continue. "You'll want a modern cut suit," he instructed, his tone that of a patient teacher. "Not something that's been in the closet for 20 years. A dark charcoal or a deep navy blue. And a power tie. Maybe something in silver or a bold red. It projects confidence and relevance." He paused, as if considering how to phrase his next point delicately. "First impressions are everything with a man like Marcus Thorne. He needs to see that Eleanor is marrying into a respectable family, one that understands the value of a strong presentation." "Ethan, stop," Eleanor pleaded, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Dad knows how to dress himself." "Ugh." "I'm sure he does," Ethan said smoothly, never taking his eyes off me. "I just want to make sure he has the best tools to work with. I could even set you up with my tailor, if you'd like. My treat." The offer was the final, perfect insult, wrapped in a bow of false generosity. He was not just offering advice. He was offering charity. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before smiling warmly. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Thank you, Ethan. That's very thoughtful of you. I will certainly keep your advice in mind." He relaxed, beaming, convinced he had skillfully navigated a potentially awkward situation. He believed he had done a good deed, helping the poor, out-of-touch old man fit in with his betters. He left feeling proud of his own magnanimity. He didn't see the look of profound worry in his fiancée's eyes, a look that told me our private conversation was coming very soon. As Ethan's car disappeared down the street, Eleanor turned to me, her polite smile gone. "I forgot to ask you about the roses," she said, her voice strained. It was a thin excuse. We both knew the real conversation was about to happen. I led her through the sliding glass door into my backyard. It was my small sanctuary, a place of neat vegetable patches and blooming rose bushes that I had cultivated with care since my so-called retirement. We sat on a simple wooden bench I had built myself. For a long moment she was silent, twisting the large diamond on her finger. "Dad, what are you doing?" she finally asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Why are you letting him talk to you that way? It's not right. He's arrogant and condescending, and you just sit there and take it." I looked at my daughter, at the fierce loyalty burning in her eyes, and felt a surge of pride. "Character, my dear," I began gently, "is not revealed in how a man treats his equals or his superiors. It is revealed in how he treats those he believes to be beneath him. I am not taking it. I am simply observing." "Observing what?" She shot back, her frustration evident. "That he's a snob? I know he can be like that. He's just ambitious. He's different when it's just the two of us." "Is he?" I asked. "Or is he just kinder when he thinks there's no one important watching?" She fell silent again, and I saw the conflict warring within her. Then she looked at me, her gaze sharp and perceptive. "This isn't just about you being retired, is it? I've seen the awards hidden in your study. I've heard the way Marcus Thorne speaks to you on the phone. You're not just some former employee, Dad. You built that company, didn't you?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I expected. I was quietly proud that she had pieced it together herself. She was smarter than Ethan gave her credit for. "Yes," I admitted softly. "Marcus and I started it in a garage 30 years ago. I am the Vance in Vance and Thorne." Eleanor stared at me, the full weight of the situation dawning on her. The past few weeks of strange, tense interactions suddenly snapped into focus. "Then you have to tell him," she whispered, horrified. "Dad, this whole thing is a lie. You're setting him up." "I am setting a stage," I corrected her. "He is the one who chooses how to perform on it. Eleanor, this is not about revenge. This is about you. I need to know the true character of the man you are marrying. It is better to see it clearly now, before the wedding, than to discover it 5 years into a marriage, when the stakes are so much higher." I took her hand. "I am asking for your trust. Don't tell him. Just watch how he behaves, how he treats people he thinks don't matter. Then you can make your own decision. If I am wrong about him, I will be the first to apologize." She looked down at our joined hands, then at the sparkling ring that suddenly seemed to carry an immense weight. I could see the battle in her eyes, loyalty to me, love for Ethan, and the terrifying fear that I might be right. Finally, she took a deep breath and nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Okay, Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll keep your secret. I'll trust you." With Eleanor's reluctant blessing, the stagecraft could begin in earnest. Ethan saw me as a man of simple tastes and limited means. It was an image I had carefully cultivated, and now it was a camouflage I would use to my full advantage. My first stop was a discreet tailor shop on Madison Avenue, a place so old-world and unassuming that men like Ethan would walk right past it. Inside, Armando, a man who had been dressing me for 30 years, greeted me not as a customer, but as an old friend. "Arthur, it has been too long," he said, his measuring tape draped around his neck like a medal. "I was telling my son just last week about the suit we made for you when you closed the deal on the Atlas Tower. You looked like a king that day." "Something a little more subdued this time, Armando," I said with a smile. "The father of the bride. Dignified but not loud." We spent an hour discussing fabrics. I chose a deep charcoal wool, a super 180 seconds that felt like water in my hands. The cut would be classic, English tailoring. It would be a suit that cost more than Ethan's monthly salary, but it would never scream its price tag. It would whisper. This was the antithesis of the power suit Ethan had advised. It was a suit built on quiet confidence, not borrowed arrogance. "For a man like you, Arthur," Armando said as he took my measurements, "the suit does not make the man. It simply confirms what is already there." Oh, a week later, I visited a private jeweler in a quiet office overlooking Central Park. This was another relationship built over decades. Miss Dubois, a woman with an impeccable eye for quality, greeted me warmly. She placed a small, velvet-lined box on the polished mahogany desk between us. "They are ready, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice hushed with reverence. Inside the box, nestled on black silk, were the platinum cufflinks. They were simple, elegant squares, but in the center of each was the stylized V and T logo of my company, rendered in brushed platinum. A single tiny diamond chip was set into the ampersand, a detail so subtle it was almost a secret. "A piece to commemorate a legacy," I said, picking one up. It felt heavy, solid in my hand. "Indeed," Miss Dubois agreed. "True quality speaks in whispers, not shouts, Mr. Vance. These are the perfect example of—" I fastened them to the cuffs of my shirt, admiring how they caught the light. They were understated, almost invisible to a casual glance. But to someone who knew our company's history, they were as loud as a trumpet call. They were a symbol only a true insider would recognize. Ethan saw that logo every day on his business card, on the letterhead of the proposals he so proudly wrote. Soon he would see it in a context he could never have possibly imagined. The week before the wedding, the final piece of my stagecraft needed to be put into place. Ethan had judged me on my perceived lack of wealth. It was time to prepare the rebuttal. I had an appointment with Jonathan Pierce, my private banker for the last 20 years. His office was on the top floor of a skyscraper in the financial district, a glass-walled suite that offered a godlike view of the city below. We exchanged pleasantries, discussing the market, and a recent philanthropic project I was funding. To Jonathan, I was not a simple retiree. I was a force. "So, what can I do for you today, Arthur?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "I need a certified check, Jonathan," I said. "A wedding gift for my daughter." "Of course," he replied, pulling a form towards him. "A very happy occasion. What is the amount?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment before I answered, my voice even and calm. $50,000. Jonathan, a man who routinely handled transactions in the millions, paused. His pen hovered over the paper as he raised an eyebrow. 50,000, he repeated, a note of sincere surprise in his voice. "That's a very generous gift, Arthur, even for you." "It's a very special occasion," I said simply. As he went to process the request, I looked out the window at the sprawling city. Down there, Ethan was running through his day, chasing deals, networking, building his kingdom of numbers and assets. He measured his worth, and the worth of others, in figures like the one being printed on my check. To him, this amount would be a trophy, a symbol of victory. But to me, it was just a tool, a means to an end. My wealth had given me freedom, but my real fortune was in the lessons I had learned, the relationships I had built, and the character I had forged over a lifetime. That was the fortune Ethan, in his blind ambition, could not see. He was chasing dollars while ignoring the true treasures of a well-lived life. This was not about showing him that I had money. It was about showing him how little his definition of wealth truly mattered. Jonathan returned and slid the crisp, certified check across the desk. The numbers were printed in a clear, bold font. There would be no mistaking them. I folded it carefully and placed it into the elegant gift envelope he provided. The suit would make a statement. The cufflinks would tell a story. But this check would deliver the lesson. The night before the wedding, the rehearsal dinner was held in a private salon at the Azure Club. The room was a study in understated luxury, with panoramic views of the glittering Manhattan skyline. I arrived punctually, dressed in a simple dark blazer and slacks, continuing my performance as the unremarkable retiree. I saw him immediately. Ethan was holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of young men in sharp, expensive suits. They were his colleagues, his lieutenants, all mirroring his own brand of aggressive, predatory ambition. He was in his element, the king of his small, self-made kingdom. He spotted me, and after a moment, waved me over with a magnanimous gesture. "Everyone," he announced as I approached, his voice carrying across the room. "I'd like you to meet the father of the bride. This is Arthur Vance. He's retired now, enjoying a quiet life up in Evanston." He delivered the lines perfectly. The tone was polite, but the subtext was clear for his inner circle. This is not one of us. Be nice, but do not take him seriously. His friends offered me brief, professional smiles before their attention drifted away. In their world, I was irrelevant. The conversation turned back to their work, a story about a difficult negotiation for a new skyscraper development. Ethan seized the moment to lecture on his personal philosophy. "In our business," he declared, his voice filled with absolute self-assurance. You have to be able to read people in an instant. It's the most crucial skill, and frankly, it's my greatest strength. I can tell you a man's net worth, his hidden fears, his ultimate ambition, all within the first 5 minutes of meeting him. He glanced in my direction for a fraction of a second, a silent underscoring of his point. I've never been wrong. The arrogance was breathtaking. He was so blinded by his own perceived brilliance that he couldn't see the abyss yawning at his feet. This was the moment, the final piece of evidence. I stepped forward slightly, and the small circle fell quiet. For the first time in 4 months, I allowed a sliver of steel to enter my voice. It was quiet, but it cut through the room's ambient chatter. Never is a very dangerous word, Ethan, I said calmly. A man who believes he can never be wrong is a man standing one step away from a very hard and very public lesson. A tense silence fell over the group. Ethan's confident smile faltered for just a moment. He saw the challenge in my eyes, but his pride, bolstered by the presence of his audience, would not let him back down. He laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of real humor. I appreciate the wisdom, Arthur, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. But I think I know what I'm doing. We will see, I replied softly. Enjoy your evening. I gave a polite nod to the group and turned to walk away. As I left, I heard him and his friends share a quiet laugh at my expense. They saw a bitter old man with a fragile ego. They had no idea they were looking at a judge who had just heard the final, damning testimony before passing sentence. The drive back to Evanston was quiet. The city's glittering skyline, a testament to the kind of ambition Ethan worshipped, blurred past my window. I felt no anger. The condescending laughter I'd heard as I left the dinner had not wounded me. It had simply been the final signature on a contract that Ethan himself had authored. Back home, I did not go to my study. Instead, I went to my bedroom. The house was silent, filled with the calm anticipation of the morning to come. Methodically, I laid out my attire for the wedding. First, the charcoal suit from Armando, its perfect lines a silent rebuke to Ethan's flashy, brand-obsessed world. Then, a crisp, white shirt. I chose a simple, elegant silver tie, an ironic nod to the power tie Ethan had recommended. Finally, I opened the small velvet box and took out the platinum cufflinks. I polished them slowly with a soft cloth until the V&T logo gleamed under the soft lamplight. Each item was a piece of a larger puzzle, a quiet declaration of a truth that would soon be revealed. Beside them, I placed the gift envelope containing the certified check. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Eleanor. "Are you okay, Dad? Ethan feels bad about tonight." He didn't feel bad for what he said, I knew. He felt bad that he had created an awkward moment. His regret was born of social inconvenience, not genuine remorse. I typed back, my thumbs moving deliberately. "I am perfectly fine, sweetheart. Don't you worry about a thing. Tomorrow will clarify everything for everyone. Just be happy. It is your day." A moment later, she replied, "I'm worried." I considered my response carefully before typing. Justice is rarely as harsh as we fear, and often kinder than we deserve. Get some sleep. I put the phone down, knowing she wouldn't write back again. I had given her all the reassurance I could. I walked to my study window and looked out at the quiet, sleeping street. My neighbors were living the peaceful lives Ethan had assigned to me. They had no idea that a man in this unassuming house was about to orchestrate the most significant corporate lesson of his career. I thought of Ethan, not with hatred, but with a strange, clinical pity. He was a product of an age that mistook confidence for competence, and volume for value. What was coming tomorrow was not an act of revenge, it was an act of correction, a necessary realignment of a world that Ethan had tried to build for himself, a world built on a foundation of profound disrespect. The board was set. The pieces were in place. All that was left was for the king to make his final, foolish move. The morning of June 15th dawned crisp and clear, a perfect summer day in New York. I dressed with the slow, deliberate care of an actor, preparing for a career-defining role, fastening the platinum cufflinks with a final, satisfying click. The Azure Club was already buzzing with a quiet, expensive energy when I arrived. Guests in couture and custom suits mingled in the sun-drenched atrium, their conversations a low, confident hum. I maintained my quiet persona, accepting a glass of water from a passing waiter and finding a discreet place to observe. Then I saw him. Marcus Thorne entered the room, looking every bit the distinguished corporate titan he was. He commanded attention without demanding it. He scanned the assembled guests, his eyes briefly passing over me with a polite, vacant nod, the kind one gives to a stranger you assume you will never see again. I returned the nod, a small, private smile playing on my lips. The game was still afoot. Soon, it was time. I made my way to the bridal suite. When the door opened, the sight of my daughter took my breath away. Eleanor stood radiant in her wedding gown, a vision of grace and beauty. For a fleeting moment, the intricate plan, the 4 months of calculated deception, all of it dissolved into the simple, overwhelming pride of a father. This was my daughter, and this was her day. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion I hadn't anticipated. "Thank you, Dad," she said, tucking her arm through mine. Her hand was trembling slightly. "Are you ready for this?" "I am," I said, and I meant it. We began our walk down the long, flower-lined aisle. The string quartet played, and every head turned towards us. I saw Ethan standing at the altar, and I had to admit, he looked struck by the sight of his bride. His face filled with a genuine adoration that reminded me why Eleanor had fallen for him. He was capable of love. He was simply blind to the true meaning of respect. In the front row, Marcus watched with an expression of polite, professional interest. When we reached the altar, the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" "Her father does, with great love and hope for her happiness," I said, my voice clear and steady. I placed Eleanor's hand into Ethan's, gave her cheek a soft kiss, and whispered, "Be happy, my dear," before taking my seat. The ceremony was beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, and their words carried a sincerity that was genuinely moving. As I sat there, I was not an architect of a grand lesson, but simply a father witnessing a sacred moment in his daughter's life. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. The chapel erupted in applause as they shared a kiss, sealing their union. The recessional music began to play, bright and triumphant. As they walked back up the aisle, beaming, they looked for all the world like a couple with a perfect, cloudless future ahead of them. The vows were spoken. The union was sealed. The ceremony was over. Now, the lesson could begin. The reception was held in the Azure Club's grand ballroom, a magnificent space with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the New York skyline like a living work of art. Champagne flowed, and the soft melodies of the string quartet provided an elegant backdrop to the murmur of conversations. Ethan was a man reborn. The wedding ring on his finger was not just a symbol of love, but a trophy. He moved through the crowd with Eleanor on his arm, a conquering hero basking in the glow of his victory. He introduced her to his colleagues, savoring the words, "my wife." From his perspective, the day was a flawless execution of his life's plan. He had secured the beautiful bride, and his powerful boss was here to witness his ascent. His success felt absolute and unassailable. I positioned myself near the bar, a silent observer in the midst of the celebration. From my vantage point, I watched Ethan. I saw him laughing, accepting congratulations, but his eyes were constantly scanning the room. He was not looking for friends or family. He was hunting. Then, I saw his gaze lock onto his target. Marcus Thorne was standing by himself near one of the massive windows, looking out at the city he had helped to build. It was the perfect opportunity, a moment of relative privacy, yet visible enough for others to witness the interaction. A chance for Ethan to demonstrate his newfound familial connections to the man who held his career in his hands. I saw the decision crystallize on Ethan's face. He leaned over and whispered something to Eleanor. I saw her hesitate, a flicker of the anxiety she had carried for months, but she nodded. Her loyalty, for now, was with her new husband. Then Ethan turned and strode purposefully in my direction. He arrived before me, his face flushed with triumph and champagne. "Arthur," he said, his voice brimming with a confidence that bordered on command. "Come with us. I want to introduce you and Eleanor to Marcus properly. The time is perfect." He was not asking. He was summoning me to play my designated role in his performance, the simple, retired father-in-law, a humble accessory to his own grand narrative. This was the moment he had been lecturing me about for months, the all-important first impression with his boss. I placed my glass of water down on the bar and straightened my jacket, feeling the subtle weight of the cufflinks against my skin. "Of course, Ethan," I said, my voice perfectly calm. He led the way, with Eleanor at his side, her hand gripping his arm a little too tightly. I followed a respectful step behind them. The walk across the polished marble floor felt both incredibly long and incredibly short. Every step was a tick of a clock, counting down to a moment of impact. It was the final walk of the man Ethan thought I was, and the first step of the man he was about to discover I truly am. Marcus Thorne turned from the window as we approached, a polite, practiced smile on his face. He was the master of this universe, and we were simply subjects entering his orbit. Ethan swelled with pride, puffing out his chest. This was his moment. "Mr. Thorne, so glad you could make it," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "I wanted to properly introduce you to my family. This, of course, is my beautiful wife, Eleanor." Marcus's smile warmed slightly as he took Eleanor's hand. "Congratulations, my dear. A lovely ceremony. Ethan is one of our brightest stars." "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. He admires you tremendously," Eleanor replied, playing her part beautifully despite the tension I knew was coiling in her stomach. Ethan beamed, soaking in the praise. Then, with a casual wave of his hand in my direction, he delivered the fatal blow, the line he had been rehearsing in his mind for months. "And this," he said, his tone shifting to one of casual dismissal, "is her father, Arthur Vance. He's a simple man, retired. An unemployed nobody, really, but a good person." The words hung in the air, a perfect crystallization of 4 months of condescension. Several of Ethan's colleagues who had drifted closer smirked. The hierarchy had been clearly established. Marcus turned to me, his professional smile still fixed in place. He extended his hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Arthur." I took his hand. As I did, his eyes met mine. I saw a flicker of confusion in their depths, a momentary glitch in his perfectly composed demeanor. He was trying to place the familiar face. Then, as our hands clasped, my jacket cuff slid back just an inch. It was all the space that was needed. The light from the grand chandelier caught the brushed platinum of my cufflink. Marcus's gaze dropped instinctively to the point of contact. He froze. His fingers, which had been giving my hand a firm, corporate shake, went slack. The polite smile on his face vanished, replaced by a look of utter, profound disbelief. His eyes were locked on the tiny, stylized V&T logo. His head snapped back up to look at my face, but this time he was truly seeing me. The vague familiarity he'd felt moments before now collided with the impossible evidence on my wrist. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a thunderclap. The retired nobody. The father-in-law. The cufflink. His carefully constructed executive mask shattered. He ignored Ethan completely, as if the young man had ceased to exist. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. "Arthur?" he said, his voice a low whisper of pure, unadulterated shock. "Arthur Vance? My God, what in the world are you doing here?" Ethan stared, his mind struggling to process a reality it was not equipped to handle. He saw Marcus's shock, but completely misread its source. He even attempted a nervous laugh, trying to regain control. "Mr. Thorne, you must be thinking of someone else," he said, shaking his head. "This is Arthur Vance, from Evanston. He's not in our world." Before Marcus could respond, I answered his question, my voice calm and steady in the growing storm. "I'm attending my daughter's wedding, Marcus. It's good to see you. You look well." My calmness seemed to enrage Marcus further. He turned on Ethan, his voice no longer shocked, but filled with a cold, hard fury that I knew all too well from our toughest negotiations. "Not in our world, Ethan," Marcus snapped, his voice cutting through the nearby conversations and causing a ripple of silence to spread through the room. "This man doesn't just exist in our world. He built it." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "This is Arthur Vance. The Vance, in Vance and Thorne Properties. My partner for 30 years. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. The smirks on the faces of Ethan's colleagues evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed horror. Eleanor took a sharp, audible breath. And Ethan. Ethan's face cycled through a rapid, sickening series of emotions. Confusion, denial, dawning comprehension, and finally, pure, unadulterated terror. The healthy tan he had cultivated for the wedding seemed to drain away, leaving his skin a sickly, waxy white. "Partner?" he croaked, the word barely a whisper. That's impossible." "The only thing that's impossible," Marcus continued, his voice now dangerously low, "is that a senior manager at my company could be this catastrophically stupid. The man you just introduced as an unemployed nobody owns 40% of this company. He signs my paycheck. He signs your paycheck." Marcus paused, letting the full weight of his words sink in. He looked from my face to Ethan's crumbling expression. Or rather, he corrected himself with chilling precision. He used to. He took a step closer to Ethan, who flinched as if he expected to be struck. "As of this moment, your employment at Vance and Thorne is terminated. You're fired." The two words, so clean and final, sliced through the stunned silence of the ballroom. They echoed in the vast, elegant space, a pronouncement of professional death. Ethan stood there, his mouth half open, his eyes wide and vacant. He was a statue of a man whose world had just been utterly and completely demolished before his own eyes. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Every guest was frozen, a spectator in a drama, far more riveting than any wedding toast. Ethan's shock finally seemed to thaw, replaced by a wave of cold, nauseating panic. His knees buckled, and Eleanor, her own face streaked with tears, rushed to steady him. His eyes, wide with a terror I had never seen in another human being, darted around the room before finally landing on me. The arrogance was gone. The condescension was gone. All that was left was the raw, primal fear of a man watching his entire world burn to the ground. He stumbled away from Eleanor's supporting arm, taking a weak step toward me. His confident stride was gone, replaced by the shuffling gait of a defeated man. "Arthur, Mr. Vance," he stammered, his voice cracking, barely a whisper. "Please. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know. I am so, so sorry. Please, don't let him do this. I'll do anything. Anything." The crowd expected a final, cutting blow from me, a witty remark to complete my triumph. I could feel their anticipation, but as I looked at the broken young man before me, I saw not the enemy, but the expensive, painful result of a lesson hard learned. I turned to Marcus, whose face was still a mask of cold fury. I placed a calming hand on his arm. "Marcus," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the profound silence. "Wait." Marcus looked at me, his eyes blazing. "Wait? Arthur? After everything he's done? The disrespect? The sheer ignorance?" "I heard every word," I said, looking back at Ethan, "and I believe he has too, for the very first time." I turned back to Marcus. "But sometimes the most effective lessons are taught through mercy, not retribution." Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in Ethan's eyes. He watched us, barely breathing, his entire future hanging on my next words. I addressed him directly, my voice clear and firm, leaving no room for misunderstanding. "I accept your apology, Ethan." A sob of relief escaped his lips. "Thank you, But," I cut him off, holding his gaze. "My forgiveness, and any chance you have of salvaging your career, comes with one non-negotiable condition." "Anything," he breathed. "I'll do absolutely anything." I let the weight of the moment settle before I delivered the terms of his new reality. "From this day forward, you will never again judge another person's worth by the clothes they wear or the size of their bank account. You will treat the janitor who cleans your office with the exact same respect you give to the CEO. Character is the only currency that truly matters. That is the price of this second chance." Ethan stood before me, awaiting the final judgment. My condition hung in the air, a clear and simple path to redemption. All eyes, however, turned to Marcus Thorne. My forgiveness was personal. His decision was professional. Marcus studied Ethan for a long, silent moment, his businessman's mind weighing every variable. His loyalty to me was warring with his pragmatic assessment of Ethan as a now proven liability. I spoke once more, my voice quiet, intended only for Marcus. He has talent, Marcus. We both know that. His numbers are real. Don't throw the talent away. Reshape it. This experience will either forge him into an exceptional manager, or it will break him. Either way, Vance and Thorne wins. That appealed to the pragmatist in him. The cold fury in his eyes finally softened, replaced by a calculated resolve. He nodded slowly, then addressed Ethan, his voice regaining its formal, authoritative tone. "All right, Croft," he said. "You keep your position. For now. But you are on professional probation for the next 6 months, reporting directly to me. I want weekly reports not on your sales, but on your team's morale." The slightest hint of the arrogance Arthur described one whisper of disrespect to anyone at any level, and you are gone permanently. Is that understood? "Completely, sir," Ethan managed, his voice thick with gratitude and exhaustion. "Completely. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. And thank you, Arthur." The name felt different in his mouth now, stripped of its condescension, filled with a new and profound respect. I extended my hand. He took it, his grip firm, but this time it was the grip of a man sealing a sacred covenant, not asserting dominance. "Welcome to the family, son," I said quietly. Eleanor stepped forward, her face a beautiful mess of tear-streaked joy and relief. She wrapped her arms around both of us, pulling us into a tight embrace. In that moment, the tension that had gripped the ballroom for what felt like an eternity finally shattered. The spell was broken. Sensing the drama had reached its conclusion, the guests slowly began to resume their conversations, their whispers now of surprise and admiration rather than scandal. They graciously gave our newly forged family a moment of privacy. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder, his familiar grin finally returning. 30 years, and you can still surprise me, partner." "Retirement keeps life interesting," I replied, and we clinked champagne glasses. The reception continued, but something had fundamentally changed. As I watched Ethan and Eleanor later, standing by the window where the whole drama had begun, I saw him listen to her with an attention he had never shown before. The sharp edges of his ambition had been softened by the hard impact of humility. A marriage had been tested and strengthened, a career had been salvaged, and a young man had learned that true wealth is not measured by what you own, but by the respect you are willing to give. And sometimes, the most valuable lessons of all come wrapped in the quiet grace of a second chance. In a world that rushes to judge, it's easy to measure a person by the noise they make, the title on their business card, the price of their suit, the figures on their bank statement. But true worth is often a much quieter thing. It's found not in what a person has, but in what they give. It's measured not by the respect they command from their superiors, but by the respect they offer to those they believe have nothing to offer in return. Character, you see, is a choice we make in those quiet moments, when we think no one of consequence is watching. The events of that wedding day were not truly about the downfall of an arrogant young man. They were about the rebuilding of one. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing a hard lesson learned, but there was a far greater joy in witnessing the birth of true humility. Our family was not broken by the ordeal. It was forged in the fire of truth, and it became stronger than I could have ever hoped. If this story of a lesson learned and a second chance given resonated with you, I would be honored to hear your own thoughts on the nature of respect in the comments below. Every story is a conversation, and your voice is an important part of it. And please, don't forget to follow our channel for more stories that explore the quiet truths that connect us all. Thank you for listening.